"Why can't you be as beautiful as she is?" Brandon said, loud enough for the entire table to hear. The words hit me like a physical blow, sharp and unexpected in the midst of what should have been a celebration. I sat there at my sister's wedding reception in Columbus, Ohio, surrounded by family and guests dressed in their finest attire, watching my husband gesture toward Chloe in her stunning white gown. The centerpieces flickered with candlelight, casting warm shadows across the elegant table settings. The band played something soft and romantic in the background, and couples swayed together on the dance floor. And my husband had just compared me unfavorably to my own sister on her wedding day, in front of everyone who mattered in my life. My mother laughed first. It was that sharp, dismissive laugh I had heard my entire life, the one that preceded every comment designed to put me in my place. "At least she makes good money," she said, patting my father's arm with a knowing smile. "Otherwise, she would be useless to everyone." My father chuckled along, nodding like this was the most reasonable observation in the world. Like reducing your daughter to her financial contributions was perfectly acceptable dinner conversation at a family wedding. Like I was not sitting right there, hearing every word. "My name is Mandy. I am 31 years old, and I work as a senior accountant at Travala Group, a mid-sized manufacturing company where I have built my career over the past 8 years through determination and countless late nights. I am good at what I do. I have been promoted 3 times. I manage a team of 6 people who respect me and trust my judgment. My performance reviews consistently praise my analytical skills and leadership abilities. But sitting at that table, listening to my husband and parents laugh at my expense, none of that seemed to matter. None of my accomplishments could shield me from the casual cruelty of the people who were supposed to love me. I looked around the beautifully decorated reception hall, trying to anchor myself in the details. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables draped in ivory linens. Fresh flowers adorned every surface, their sweet fragrance mingling with the aroma of the catered meal. The venue was one of the most prestigious in the city, and every element had been carefully chosen to create an atmosphere of elegance and celebration. My sister had spared no expense, and our parents had happily contributed, just as they had contributed to her down payment on her house, her car, her graduate school tuition. Chloe had always been the golden child, the beautiful one, the one who deserved investment, because she would obviously yield returns. I was merely the practical one, the backup plan. I had paid my own way through college, working 2 jobs while carrying a full course load. I had scraped together every penny for my apartment deposit. When I got married 3 years ago, my parents gave us a card with $100 inside and told us they hoped we would be happy. That was the extent of their investment in my future. Chloe's wedding had a budget that could have paid off my student loans twice over, with enough left for a down payment on a modest house. "Excuse me," I said quietly, pushing back my chair. "I need to use the washroom." Brandon barely glanced at me. He was already turning back to my cousin, continuing some story about his golf game, laughing at his own jokes. My mother waved her hand dismissively, and my father reached for another roll from the breadbasket. I might as well have been invisible. I had been invisible to them my entire life, present but unimportant, useful but never valued. I walked through the reception hall with my head held high, though my eyes burned with tears I refused to let fall. I smiled at guests I passed, nodded at distant relatives, maintained the facade I had perfected over 31 years of being the less-than daughter, the adequate wife, the dependable workhorse who could be counted on to show up, contribute, and never complain. The mask was second nature now, but tonight it felt heavier than usual. The washroom was mercifully empty. I locked myself in a stall and pressed my hands against the cool metal door, trying to steady my breathing. The tears came then, silent and hot, streaming down my cheeks and probably ruining the makeup I had spent an hour applying that morning. I had wanted to look my best for the wedding. I had wanted, foolishly, to feel beautiful for once. I thought about all the times I had swallowed insults like this. All the times Brandon had made comments about my weight, my hair, my clothes, always framed as helpful suggestions for improvement. All the times my parents had praised Chloe's accomplishments while barely acknowledging mine. All the times I had smiled and nodded and told myself it did not matter, that I was strong enough to rise above it, that their opinions did not define me. But something felt different tonight. Maybe it was the combination of Brandon's cruelty and my parents' laughter, their voices harmonizing in mockery of everything I was. Maybe it was seeing Chloe so radiant and happy while I sat there being humiliated at her celebration. Maybe it was simply that I had reached some invisible limit, some threshold I had not known existed until I crossed it. I emerged from the stall and stood in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection under the harsh fluorescent lights. My mascara had smudged slightly beneath my eyes. My carefully styled hair was still intact. But beyond those surface details, I saw something I had not noticed before. Something that had been there all along. I saw a woman who had spent her entire life trying to earn love from people who would never give it freely. A woman who had married a man who saw her as a stepping stone rather than a partner. A woman who had been measured, compared, and found wanting at every turn. And I saw a woman who was finally tired of accepting it. Growing up in my family meant understanding your place in the hierarchy early. Chloe was born beautiful, with delicate features and an easy charm that made people gravitate toward her without effort. She had our mother's graceful bone structure and our father's bright eyes. I was born practical, with my father's square jaw and my mother's tendency toward weight gain. By the time I was old enough to understand these things, the roles had already been assigned. Chloe was the princess. I was the workhorse. Chloe took dance lessons, piano lessons, voice lessons. She competed in pageants and won trophies that still lined our parents' mantel in the living room, gathering dust but never removed. I joined the math team and the debate club because those activities were free, and no one needed to drive me to practices or buy me costumes. When report cards came home, Chloe's B- in algebra was celebrated as hard-won progress that deserved special recognition, while my straight A's were acknowledged with a brief nod before my parents returned to discussing Chloe's upcoming recital or her latest pageant preparations. I do not think my parents were deliberately cruel, at least not in the beginning. They simply had a limited capacity for attention, and Chloe absorbed most of it by virtue of being the kind of daughter they had imagined having. She was the one who would marry well and give them beautiful grandchildren and host elegant dinner parties. I was the backup plan, the one who would take care of herself and maybe help out financially when needed. Different daughters, different expectations, different investments. When I graduated from college, summa cum laude with a degree in accounting and a job offer already secured, my parents took us all out to dinner at a chain restaurant. The meal was pleasant enough, but I noticed they checked their phones throughout, already thinking about other things. When Chloe graduated 2 years later with a degree in communications and a 2.8 grade point average, they threw her a party with 100 guests and a catered buffet. They gave speeches about her potential and her bright future, about how proud they were of everything she had accomplished. I told myself it did not matter. I told myself that my worth was not determined by my parents' attention or approval. I built a career, earned promotions, saved money, and created a life that I could be proud of, even if no one else noticed. And then I met Brandon at a friend's party, and I thought things might finally be different. He was charming at first, the way men like him always are. He complimented my intelligence, my work ethic, my stability. He said he admired a woman who had her life together, who knew what she wanted and went after it. What I did not realize then was that he admired those qualities because he wanted to benefit from them, not because he valued me as a person. He saw a stable income, a reliable partner, someone who would manage the details of life so he did not have to. The first time he made a comment about my appearance, we had been married for 6 months. I had gained a few pounds over the holidays, enjoying our first winter as a married couple, and he suggested I might want to think about joining a gym. His tone was casual, almost concerned. I told myself he was being helpful, that he wanted me to be healthy. The second time, he compared me to a coworker's wife at a work dinner, noting loudly how put together she always looked. I told myself he just wanted me to be the best version of myself, that his comments came from a place of caring. By our second anniversary, the comments had become constant background noise in our relationship. My hair was wrong, either too long or too short, never quite right. My clothes were frumpy, not stylish enough for social occasions. My cooking was bland, not as good as his mother's. My housekeeping was inadequate, always something left undone. Nothing I did was ever quite good enough, and I had somehow convinced myself that if I just tried harder, worked more, improved myself in all the ways he suggested, I would finally earn his approval. I realized, standing in that washroom at my sister's wedding, that I had spent my entire life trying to earn approval from people who would never give it. My parents would always see me as the less-than daughter, the practical one who existed to make their lives easier. Brandon would always find something to criticize, some new flaw to point out. No amount of achievement, effort, or self-improvement would ever be enough, because the problem was not me. The problem was that I had surrounded myself with people who needed someone to look down on, and I had volunteered for the role. I washed my face carefully, reapplied my makeup with steady hands that belied the turmoil inside me, and looked at myself in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was not the inadequate daughter or the disappointing wife. She was someone who had built a successful career despite having no support. Someone who had earned everything she had through hard work and determination. Someone who deserved better than this. I thought about Brandon, about the way he talked to me, the way he looked at me with barely concealed contempt when I fell short of his ever-shifting standards. I thought about my parents, about the lifetime of casual cruelty disguised as practical observation. I thought about Chloe, who had absorbed all the love and attention without ever once acknowledging that I might need some too. And I thought about what would happen if I stopped accepting it, if I stopped smiling through insults and pretending everything was fine, if I finally stood up for myself instead of hoping someone else would do it for me. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time, like standing at the edge of a cliff with unknown waters below. But I was already drowning in the life I had built. What did I have to lose by jumping? When I returned to the reception, the first thing I noticed was that no one had registered my absence. Brandon was deep in conversation with my uncle about some investment opportunity he was pursuing, gesturing enthusiastically with his drink. My parents were chatting with neighbors from their street, my mother's laugh carrying across the room. Chloe was making the rounds with her new husband, accepting congratulations and admiring comments about her dress, her hair, her perfect day. I stood at the edge of the room for a moment, watching them all with new eyes. It was strange, seeing my family through this different lens. I noticed how my mother's smile never quite reached her eyes when she looked at me. I noticed how my father's attention wandered whenever I spoke, his gaze drifting to more interesting conversations. I noticed how Brandon's hand never reached for mine, how he positioned his body away from me even when we were seated side by side, like he was already looking for someone better. I had been so focused on earning their approval that I had never stopped to notice they had no intention of giving it. I made my way back to our table, where Brandon had apparently just delivered another joke at my expense. Several people were laughing, including my cousin and her husband, who had always seemed friendly enough. When they saw me approaching, the laughter died down awkwardly, eyes shifting away from mine, which told me everything I needed to know about the topic of their amusement. "There she is," Brandon said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "We were just talking about you. I heard," I said quietly, taking my seat without elaborating. He blinked, surprised perhaps by my tone. I was not usually so direct. I usually smiled and pretended I had not noticed, made some self-deprecating comment to ease the tension and give him permission to continue. But tonight, I simply looked at him and let the silence stretch between us like a challenge. "Oh, lighten up," he said finally, turning away with an annoyed shake of his head. "It was just a joke." It was at that moment that I felt someone's eyes on me. I looked up and saw a man at the next table watching me with an expression I could not quite read. He was older, perhaps in his late 50s, with silver hair and kind eyes that seemed to take in the whole scene with quiet understanding. I recognized him vaguely as one of Chloe's new in-laws, though I did not know his name or his exact relation to her husband. He gave me a small nod, almost imperceptible to anyone not looking for it. There was something in that nod, some acknowledgement of what had just happened. Not pity exactly, but recognition, understanding. As if he had seen the whole ugly dynamic play out and wanted me to know that someone had witnessed it, that someone saw me even when my own family refused to. I found myself nodding back, grateful in a way I could not explain. In a room full of family who had never truly seen me, this stranger had noticed. He had seen the cruelty for what it was, and had acknowledged my dignity with that simple gesture when no one else would. The dinner continued, courses arriving and being cleared away by efficient servers. Speeches were made, toasts were given, and Chloe cried prettily when her new husband spoke about their love story. Brandon made another comment about how emotional women got at weddings, glancing at me with that familiar smirk that suggested I was somehow included in the mockery. "You know," my mother said, leaning across the table toward Brandon, "Chloe really does look beautiful tonight. Do not you think so? She is just glowing. I have never seen her happier." "She really is," Brandon agreed, his eyes following my sister across the room with an appreciation that made my stomach turn. "Some women just have that natural beauty, you know. Others have to work harder at it." My mother laughed, and the sound was like nails on a chalkboard. "Well, at least Mandy has her career. That is something." "Something," Brandon echoed, and they shared a look of mutual understanding that made my stomach turn with a combination of anger and grief. I sat very still, feeling something cold settle in my chest. This was not new. These comments, this dynamic, had been playing out my entire life. But tonight, instead of feeling the familiar shame and inadequacy, I felt something else entirely. Clarity. I saw my mother, who had spent her life living vicariously through her beautiful daughter while treating her capable one as an afterthought. I saw my father, who had never once defended me, who had laughed along with every joke at my expense because it was easier than standing up for his own child. And I saw Brandon, the man I had married believing he loved me, who had never seen me as anything more than a steady paycheck and a convenient target for his insecurities. The man at the next table caught my eye again. This time he raised his glass slightly in my direction, a silent salute. It was a small gesture, but it felt enormous in that moment. Someone saw me. Someone recognized my humanity in a room full of people who had reduced me to my usefulness. I thought about leaving right then, walking out of the reception and never looking back. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the desire to see this through, to understand exactly what I was dealing with before I made any decisions. Or maybe I simply was not ready yet to blow up my entire life, even though I knew now with certainty that it needed to change. So I stayed. I watched and listened and cataloged every slight, every dismissal, every cruel joke made at my expense. And with each one, I felt something hardening inside me. Not bitterness exactly, but resolve. The quiet determination of a woman who had finally stopped hoping her family would change and started planning her own escape. By the end of the night, I knew exactly who these people were. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that I could not continue living this way. The week after Chloe's wedding passed in a strange haze, like I was moving through water while everyone else existed in normal air. I went to work, managed my team, attended meetings, and performed all my duties with the same competence I had always shown. No one at the office noticed anything different. But something fundamental had shifted inside me, and I felt like I was watching my life from outside my body, observing the patterns and dynamics I had never questioned before. Brandon noticed nothing. He came home from his sales job each evening around 6:30, complained about his manager's unreasonable expectations, asked what was for dinner, and retreated to his phone or the television without waiting for my answer. He did not ask how I was doing. He did not notice that I had been quieter than usual, that my responses had become shorter, that I no longer rushed to fill the silence between us with forced conversation. He simply expected me to function as I always had, like a well-maintained appliance that required no attention beyond basic operation. On Thursday evening, my mother called. I stared at her name on my phone screen for a long moment before answering, feeling my stomach clench with familiar anxiety. "Mandy, I need you to do something for me," she said without preamble, without asking how I was or what I was doing. "Your father and I want to throw Chloe and her husband a party next month. A welcome to the family celebration, something elegant. I need you to help with the arrangements. Not ask, need. Because in my mother's mind, my time and effort were resources she was entitled to, available for deployment whenever she required them. I am pretty busy with work right now," I said carefully, testing this unfamiliar boundary. "We have a big audit coming up. Maybe you could hire a party planner." There was a pause, the kind of heavy silence that had always made me rush to fill it with apologies and accommodations. This time, I waited, letting the discomfort sit between us. "A party planner?" My mother's voice sharpened with irritation. "That is ridiculous. You are family. This is what family does, Mandy. Besides, you know how to handle these things. You are so practical. You always manage to pull things together." There it was again. Practical. The word she used instead of beautiful or charming or special. Practical meant useful. Practical meant I could be called upon to do the work while Chloe basked in the celebration. Practical meant I existed to serve, not to be served. "I will think about it," I said, which was not a yes or a no, just a boundary I had never set before. My mother's surprised silence was almost satisfying. Almost. Beneath it, I could feel the familiar guilt rising, the deeply ingrained need to smooth things over, to be agreeable, to maintain the peace at any cost to myself. "Well," she said finally, her voice cooling several degrees, "I suppose I should not be surprised. You have always been a bit self-centered, Mandy. But I thought family would mean something to you. I thought after everything we have done for you, you would want to help." I hung up without responding, my heart pounding against my ribs. My hands were shaking, but I was not sure if it was from anger or adrenaline. I had never done that before. I had never ended a conversation with my mother without making sure everything was smooth, that she was appeased, that I had fulfilled whatever role she needed me to play. Brandon came into the kitchen then, eyebrows raised with mild curiosity. "Was that your mother? What did she want?" "She wants me to plan another party for Chloe," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "So? That is what you do. You are the organized one." He opened the refrigerator and peered inside, already losing interest in the conversation. "What is for dinner? I am starving." I stared at his back, at the casual assumption that I would feed him, help my family, carry all the invisible labor without complaint or compensation. I told her I would think about it. Brandon turned around, frowning with genuine confusion. "What do you mean, think about it?" "Just do it. It is not like you have anything else going on." "I have work. I manage a department with 6 people reporting to me. I come home and cook and clean and do everything that keeps this household running." The words came out harder than I intended, but I did not take them back. "What exactly do you think I do all day?" Brandon's expression shifted from surprise to something colder, more defensive. "Oh, here we go. What is this? Some kind of feminist thing? You knew what you were signing up for when we got married. This is how partnerships work." "Did I?" I heard myself ask. "What exactly did I sign up for? Being told I am not as beautiful as my sister? Being laughed at by my own parents? Being treated like a servant in my own home while you contribute nothing but criticism?" The kitchen went very quiet. Brandon stared at me like he was seeing someone he did not recognize. In a way, maybe he was. The Mandy he knew would never have pushed back like this. The Mandy he married would have apologized by now, would have made a joke to smooth things over, would have retreated into compliance and pretended the conversation never happened. "I do not know what is going on with you," he said slowly, carefully. "But you need to get over whatever this is. Your family needs you to help with the party. I need you to stop being so dramatic. That is how life works, Mandy. You do your part." "And what part do you do?" I asked quietly. "What exactly do you contribute to this family, Brandon?" His face flushed with anger. "I go to work every day. I provide for us. I make more money than you do. I also go to work every day, and I do everything here too." I was not shouting, but each word felt like a stone I had been carrying for years, finally being laid down. "So what exactly are you providing that I could not provide for myself?" Brandon opened his mouth, closed it, and then turned and walked out of the kitchen. A moment later, I heard the front door slam hard enough to rattle the windows. Brandon did not come home that night. He sent a text around midnight saying he was staying at his friend's place, and that I needed to calm down before they could have a rational conversation. I read the message 3 times, marveling at how neatly he had shifted the blame. I was the one who needed to calm down. I was the one being irrational. Never mind that he had fled rather than answer a simple question about his contributions to our marriage. Never mind that he had compared me unfavorably to my sister in front of dozens of people, and seen nothing wrong with it. I slept better that night than I had in months. The bed felt larger without him in it. The room quieter without his phone buzzing with notifications at all hours. The air easier to breathe without his presence filling the space. I woke up the next morning with a strange sense of clarity, like a fog had lifted, and I could finally see the landscape I had been wandering through blind. At work, I found myself confiding in my colleague Victoria, who had become something of a friend over our years of working together in adjacent offices. We were having lunch in the break room, picking at salads from the cafeteria downstairs, when she asked how the wedding had gone. "It was beautiful," I said automatically, the reflexive response I had given everyone who asked. Then I stopped, fork halfway to my mouth. "Actually, that is not true. It was terrible. My husband spent the whole night comparing me unfavorably to my sister, and my parents laughed along like it was the funniest joke they had ever heard." Victoria put down her fork, her expression shifting from polite interest to genuine concern. "He did what?" I told her everything. The comment about Chloe's beauty and my inadequacy, my mother's observation about my usefulness, the years of small cruelties I had absorbed and minimized and explained away, the fight last night and Brandon's dramatic exit. Victoria listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from surprise to concern, to something that looked like righteous anger. "Mandy," she said when I finished, her voice quiet but firm, "I have known you for 5 years. You are one of the smartest, most competent people I have ever worked with. You run circles around half the people in this company. How have you been putting up with this?" "I do not know," I admitted, feeling the truth of it settle in my chest. I think I convinced myself it was normal, that every family has their quirks, every marriage has its rough patches. But hearing it laid out like that, hearing you react to it, I shook my head slowly. "It is not normal, is it?" "No," Victoria said firmly. "It is not normal. It is emotional abuse, Mandy, from all of them." The word hit me like a physical blow. Abuse. I had never thought of it that way, had never allowed myself to name it so clearly. Abuse was visible, dramatic, undeniable. What I had experienced was subtle, insidious, dressed up in family dynamics and marital friction. But hearing Victoria name it, I realized she was right. The constant criticism, the comparisons, the reduction of my worth to my utility. That was abuse. It had just been so normalized that I could not see it for what it was. That evening, Brandon came home with flowers. Not because he was sorry, I suspected, but because he thought flowers would reset things to normal, would return us to the comfortable dysfunction we had maintained for 3 years. He handed them to me with a tight smile and waited for my grateful response. "Thank you," I said, taking them. "We need to talk." His smile faltered immediately. "I was hoping we could just move past last night. You were tired, I was stressed, things were said. It happens in every marriage. Things have been said for 3 years, Brandon. At the wedding you told a table full of people that I was not as beautiful as my sister. My parents agreed and added that at least I made money. Do you have any idea how that felt? Do you have any idea how many times I have swallowed comments like that?" He shifted uncomfortably, looking anywhere but at me. "It was just a joke. Your family jokes around like that all the time. I was just going along with it. At my expense. Always at my expense. And you join in because it is easier than defending me. Because you agree with them. You are being too sensitive." His voice had that edge now, the one that usually made me back down and apologize. "This is what families do. They tease each other. If you cannot handle it, that is your problem, not mine." "Maybe it is my problem," I agreed quietly, surprising both of us. "And maybe the solution is to stop spending time with people who think cruelty is funny." Brandon stared at me, confusion and irritation warring on his face. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means I am not going to plan Chloe's party. It means I am going to start thinking seriously about what I want my life to look like. And it means you need to decide if you want to be part of that life as a partner who treats me with respect, or if you want to keep treating me like a combination maid, chef, and punching bag." His face went red, then white. "You are being ridiculous. After everything I have done for you." "What have you done for me, Brandon?" I kept my voice calm, though my heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. "Name one thing. One sacrifice you have made. One time you put my needs before yours." The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I watched his face as he searched for an answer, and came up empty. The realization that he could not think of a single example was damning, and we both knew it. "I think you need some time to think about what you really want," he said finally, his voice cold and distant. "Because right now, you are not acting like the woman I married. Maybe the woman you married was too afraid to show you who she really was," I replied steadily. "Maybe she is finally tired of pretending." The next 2 weeks were a quiet war. Brandon and I moved through our home like strangers, polite and distant. He stopped making comments about my appearance, but only because he had stopped talking to me about anything substantial. He seemed to be waiting for me to crack, to apologize and return to normal, to resume my role as the compliant wife who accepted whatever treatment he chose to deliver. I was done being normal. My mother called twice more about the party. The first time, I let it go to voicemail and listened to her increasingly irritated message about responsibility and family duty. The second time, Chloe called instead, apparently recruited as reinforcement. "Mandy, what is going on?" my sister demanded without greeting. "Mom says you are refusing to help with the welcome party. She is really upset. She cried this morning." "I am busy with work," I said, keeping my voice even. "You could hire a party planner. There are some excellent ones in the city." "That is not the point. The point is that you are family. You are supposed to want to help. You are supposed to care about these things." Chloe's voice had that wounded quality she wielded so effectively, the tone that had always made our parents rush to comfort her. "I always thought we were close, Mandy. I do not understand why you are being like this all of a sudden." Something in me snapped, the restraint I had been maintaining finally giving way. "Do you want to know why, Chloe? Because at your wedding, my husband told everyone I was not as beautiful as you, and our parents laughed and said at least I made good money. And you were right there, 6 feet away from us. You heard it, and you did not say a word. You just kept smiling and accepting compliments like nothing had happened." There was a pause, longer than comfortable. "I do not remember that," Chloe said finally, her voice smaller now. "You were standing right there." "I was busy, Mandy. It was my wedding day. I was not paying attention to everything everyone said at every table. There were 200 people there." Her voice had shifted now, defensive and a little angry. "Besides, you know how Brandon is. He was probably just joking around. He jokes like that all the time." It was not funny. It was humiliating. And it is not the first time, Chloe. It has been happening my entire life, at every family dinner, every holiday, every event. I am always the joke, the practical one, the one who does the work while you get the praise and the attention and the money. "That is not fair," Chloe protested. "I did not ask for any of that. I did not ask to be treated differently. But you never stopped it either. You never once stood up for me. You just absorbed all the attention and love and assumed it was your due because you were the pretty one." I took a breath, trying to steady myself. "I am not angry at you for being beautiful, Chloe. I am angry because you never seemed to notice that the way our family treated us differently was cruel. Or maybe you did notice and just did not care because it benefited you." Chloe was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller, less certain. "I did notice. Sometimes. But I did not know what to do about it. It was just how things were. I thought you were okay with it. Well, I am done accepting how things were. If you want a party, hire a planner. I am no longer available to do the invisible work that keeps this family running while getting nothing in return but mockery." I hung up before she could respond. My hands were trembling, but I felt lighter than I had in years. That weekend, I started looking at apartments online. Not because I had definitely decided to leave Brandon, but because I needed to know I could. I needed to understand that I had options, that I was not trapped in this life by circumstance or finances. The act of searching, of imagining a life on my own terms in a space that was entirely mine, felt revolutionary. Brandon found the apartment listings on my laptop. He had been snooping, probably looking for evidence that I was the unreasonable one, ammunition to use against me. Instead, he found proof that I was considering leaving. "What is this?" He thrust the laptop at me, his face twisted with anger and something that might have been fear. "You are looking at apartments? You are actually looking at apartments?" "I am exploring my options," I said calmly. "Your options?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. You are going to leave me? And do what exactly? Live alone in some cramped apartment like some sad spinster? Good luck with that. Maybe. Or maybe I will live alone in a nice apartment where no one criticizes how I look or laughs at me with my own family. I met his eyes without flinching. Being alone sounds better than being constantly diminished by someone who is supposed to love me. Brandon's expression flickered. Anger, fear, something that might have been genuine regret. You are overreacting. Every couple has problems. You do not just walk away from a marriage over some stupid comments. Our problems are not normal, Brandon. Our problems are that you do not respect me, you do not value me, and you actively participate in my humiliation. That is not a marriage. That is a prison sentence I have been serving for 3 years. He grabbed my arm then, hard enough to leave marks. You are not leaving. Do you understand me? You are not going to embarrass me by walking out. I looked down at his hand on my arm, at the way his fingers dug into my flesh, then up at his face. Something in my expression must have changed, because he let go immediately, looking almost surprised at his own actions. Do not ever touch me like that again, I said, my voice steady even though my heart was racing. And do not tell me what I can and cannot do. This marriage has been a one-way street for 3 years, and the road ends here. I will be staying with Victoria tonight. We can discuss the details of separating when you are ready to have a civilized conversation. I grabbed my purse and keys and walked out the door. Behind me, I heard Brandon calling my name, his voice shifting from anger to something that sounded almost like panic. But I did not turn around. For the first time in my life, I was walking away from someone who tried to diminish me, and it felt like freedom. Victoria welcomed me into her home without question or judgment. She had a spare bedroom that was neat and comfortable, decorated in soft blues and whites that felt peaceful after the chaos of my departure. She made tea while I sat on her couch, processing what I had just done. I had walked out on my marriage. I had left Brandon standing in our kitchen, watching me go. How do you feel? Victoria asked, handing me a mug of chamomile. Terrified, I admitted, wrapping my hands around the warm ceramic. And relieved, and angry, all at once, all mixed together. That sounds about right. She sat down across from me, her expression kind but serious. What are you going to do? I do not know yet. I need to figure out the finances, find a place to live, decide if I want to try counseling or just file for divorce. I took a sip of tea, letting the warmth steady me. But right now, I am just going to sit with this feeling. The feeling of having finally stood up for myself after 31 years of accepting less than I deserved. The next morning, my phone exploded with messages. Brandon, demanding I come home immediately. My mother, furious that I had upset everyone with my selfish behavior, accusing me of ruining Chloe's newlywed happiness with my drama. My father, sending a single text that said only, "Call your mother." Even Chloe chimed in, asking what was going on and whether I was having some kind of mental breakdown. I turned off my phone and went to work. At the office, I threw myself into a project I had been putting off for weeks. It was a comprehensive audit of our department's procedures, the kind of meticulous work that required complete focus and left no room for intrusive thoughts. For 8 hours, I did not think about Brandon or my parents, or the mess my personal life had become. I just worked, and it felt like reclaiming a part of myself I had forgotten existed, the part that was competent and capable and valuable on my own terms. When I turned my phone back on that evening, there were 47 missed calls and over 100 text messages. I scrolled through them, noting the escalating tone. Brandon had moved from demanding, to pleading, to threatening, cycling through the stages of manipulation I had witnessed so many times before. My mother's messages were a masterclass in guilt and emotional blackmail. But one message stood out. It was from a number I did not recognize. I read it 3 times before I understood what I was seeing. The message was from Julian, the older man who had caught my eye at the wedding, the one who had nodded at me in silent acknowledgement of my humiliation. He was Chloe's new father-in-law, and somehow he had gotten my number. The message was simple and direct. I saw what happened at the wedding. If you ever need someone to talk to who understands family dynamics, I am here. No judgment, no expectations. Just support from someone who has seen similar patterns before. I stared at the screen for a long time, reading and rereading his words. It was such a small gesture, but it meant more than Julian could possibly know. In the midst of my entire support system crumbling, family who blamed me, a husband who felt entitled to my compliance, here was a near stranger offering simple human kindness without any strings attached. I texted back, "Thank you. That means more than you know." Over the next few weeks, Julian and I exchanged occasional messages. He never pried or pushed for details, just offered gentle observations and support when I needed it. I learned that he was a retired family therapist who had spent his career helping people untangle themselves from toxic family systems. He understood what I was going through in a way that few others could, not because he had lived it himself, but because he had witnessed its effects on countless others. "The hardest part," he wrote one evening, "is accepting that the people who were supposed to protect you chose not to. It is not a reflection of your worth. It is a reflection of their limitations." Those words unlocked something in me. I had spent my entire life assuming I was the problem. Not beautiful enough, not charming enough, not worthy enough of the love and attention that seemed to flow so freely to everyone else. But the problem was never me. The problem was a family that needed someone to diminish so they could feel elevated. And a husband who had learned he could treat me badly because no one would stop him. I filed for divorce on a Tuesday morning, walking into the courthouse with determination I had never felt before. The paperwork was straightforward. We had no children, and I wanted nothing from Brandon except my freedom. He could keep the house we had bought together with my down payment. He could keep the furniture I had chosen and the life I had built around him. I just wanted out. The divorce papers arrived at Brandon's door on a Friday afternoon. By Saturday morning, my phone was ringing constantly. This time, I answered, ready to face whatever came next. "You cannot be serious," Brandon said, his voice tight with anger and something that might have been fear. "Divorce papers? Over a few comments at a wedding?" "Over years of comments," I corrected him calmly. "Over a pattern of disrespect and cruelty that I am no longer willing to accept. This is insane. You are throwing away our marriage because you are too sensitive to take a joke. Everyone at that wedding thought it was funny. You were the only one who got upset. I am throwing away a marriage where I was the only one investing. I am not too sensitive, Brandon. You are too cruel. There is a difference, and it took me 3 years to see it." He sputtered, searching for a response. "Your family agrees with me. Your mother called yesterday, said you have always been difficult, said you were never grateful for anything they did for you." "My family," I said quietly, "is part of the problem. They taught you that it was acceptable to treat me this way. But I am not playing by their rules anymore." The conversation went nowhere, as I had expected. Brandon alternated between rage and self-pity, between threats about what he would do during the divorce and bargaining about couples therapy and fresh starts. I listened without engaging, let him exhaust himself against my calm refusal to bend. When he finally hung up, I felt nothing but relief. My mother's call came next, exactly as predicted. "Mandy, what have you done?" Her voice was sharp with accusation, the same tone she had used my entire life when I failed to meet her expectations. "Brandon is devastated. He called us this morning crying. How could you be so heartless? Did he tell you why I filed for divorce? Did he tell you about the years of criticism, the public humiliation at Chloe's wedding, the way he grabbed my arm hard enough to leave bruises?" A pause, longer than comfortable. "He said you were being dramatic, that you took things out of context." "Of course he did." I laughed, surprising myself with the sound. "And you believed him. Just like you have always believed the worst about me and the best about everyone else. That is not fair. It is completely fair. At Chloe's wedding, my husband said out loud that I was not as beautiful as my sister. You and Dad laughed and said at least I made good money. Do you remember that? Do you remember how everyone at the table laughed while I sat there being humiliated?" Silence. Then, "That was just teasing. We did not mean anything by it. You have been teasing me my entire life, Mom. Every comment about Chloe's beauty and my practicality. Every comparison that made me feel less than. Every time you invested in her future and overlooked mine. It was not teasing. It was cruelty, and I accepted it because I thought that was what family meant. You are overreacting. No, I am finally reacting appropriately. I am done being the family workhorse who gets nothing in return but mockery. I am done being married to a man who treats me the way you taught him to treat me. And I am done pretending any of this is acceptable. If you do this, my mother said coldly, you will have no family. We will not support this divorce. You will be completely alone. I have been alone my entire life, I said. The only difference now is that I am choosing it. I hung up and turned off my phone. Then I sat in Victoria's guest room and cried. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming release of finally speaking truth to people who had never wanted to hear it. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. Brandon contested nothing in the end. Perhaps because he knew he had no case, or perhaps because he had already found someone else to control. I signed my name on the final documents and walked out of the courthouse into bright afternoon sunlight, feeling lighter than I had in years. I had lost a husband who never valued me and a family who never protected me. But I had gained something far more precious. Myself. 6 months after my divorce, I was promoted to Director of Finance at Travala Group. The announcement came at a company meeting, and my team gave me a standing ovation. For the first time in my life, I accepted recognition without feeling like I needed to minimize it, or apologize for taking up space, or worry about who might be jealous. I had moved into my own apartment, a small but beautiful space with large windows that let in morning light. I decorated it exactly the way I wanted, with no one to criticize my choices or make me feel like my taste was inadequate. I cooked meals I enjoyed, kept hours that suited me, and built a life that was entirely my own. Julian and I met for coffee occasionally. He had become something of a mentor, helping me understand the family dynamics I had escaped, and process the grief of letting go of relationships I had tried so hard to maintain. He never asked for anything in return, just offered wisdom and kindness. "How are things with your family?" he asked during one of our conversations. "Quiet," I said. My mother stopped calling after I refused to apologize. My father has not reached out at all. Chloe sends occasional texts, but we have not really talked. Does that bother you? I considered the question carefully. Sometimes. I mourn the family I wanted, the relationships I tried so hard to build. But I do not miss the reality of those relationships. The constant criticism, the feeling of never being enough. I am better without that in my life. Julian nodded. That is wisdom hard won. A year after Chloe's wedding, I heard through the grapevine that Brandon had gotten engaged again. His new fiancée was 23, fresh out of college, eager to please. I felt a pang of something. Not jealousy, but concern for this young woman who did not know yet what she was walking into. But that was not my burden to carry. I also heard that my parents had been telling people I had abandoned my family over nothing, that I was ungrateful and selfish, that I had broken poor Brandon's heart with my coldness. The narrative did not surprise me. They needed to be the victims, needed the story to make sense in a way that did not require them to examine their own behavior. But something unexpected happened too. Chloe's marriage fell apart within 18 months. Her husband had been unfaithful, and she found herself suddenly single, suddenly imperfect, suddenly on the receiving end of our parents' disappointed expectations. She reached out to me then, tentative and uncertain. "I think I understand now," she said during a long phone call, her voice small. "What it was like for you, being measured and found wanting. I always thought being the favorite was a blessing, but it was just a different kind of cage. They only loved me for what I represented, not for who I was." "I know," I said. "It took me a long time to see that their love came with conditions none of us could ever really meet. Chloe and I are not close now, but we are honest with each other. We are both in therapy, both unlearning the patterns our parents installed. It is slow, painful work, but it is worth it." Brandon's second engagement ended badly when his fiancée discovered his pattern of cruel comments and controlling behavior. She left him after finding messages where he compared her unfavorably to other women, the same pattern he had subjected me to for years. Last I heard, he was living alone in the house we once shared, complaining to anyone who would listen about how women these days could not take a joke. My parents, faced with 2 daughters who no longer played their assigned roles, have become increasingly isolated. The neighbors they used to brag to have noticed the absence of family gatherings, the lack of grandchildren, the quiet that has replaced the dysfunction. My mother's health has declined, And my father's retirement savings have dwindled from poor investments. They have reached out a few times, always with demands disguised as reconciliation attempts. I have not responded. They created a family where cruelty was acceptable and love was conditional. And now they must live in the emptiness that remains. I do not wish them harm, but I also do not owe them my forgiveness or my presence. They had decades to treat me with basic dignity and chose not to. The consequences of that choice are theirs to live with. Sometimes I think about that night at Chloe's wedding, about sitting at that table while my husband and parents laughed at my expense. I think about walking to the washroom and standing in front of the mirror, seeing myself clearly for the first time. That was the night everything changed. Not because I stopped being humiliated. I had been humiliated countless times before, but because I finally decided I deserved better. The best revenge, it turns out, is not dramatic confrontation or public exposure. It is simply building a life where the people who hurt you no longer have access to your joy. It is becoming the person you were always capable of being, without the weight of their disapproval holding you down. I am 33 years old now. I have a career I love, friends who value me, and a peaceful home where no one tells me I am not enough. I still carry scars from the years of casual cruelty, but those scars are healing. And when I look in the mirror now, I do not see the inadequate daughter or the disappointing wife. I see a woman who finally learned to protect herself, who chose her own peace over their approval, who discovered that the most powerful revenge is simply living well. That is worth more than any revenge I could have imagined.